because after this service, we've got the youth-led worship service, and I may need to get to them to remind people like what position they're playing and all that kind of stuff. So we have been moving through this class on heresies. I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's been really beneficial to revisit all this stuff and figure out where I've been preaching wrong. So that, no, every once in a while, I'm like, uh-oh, am I doing, and then, I check it out and I'm usually okay still. So, but I do want to review something real fast because I showed you all this last time, and in case you missed it, we were talking about Arianism and Jesus being both human and divine, fully man, fully God. And I also wanted to share this because we were talking about different understandings of the Trinity. In case you haven't seen this drawing before, it's a helpful one to see. So all of this is God. This alone is no less God than this alone or this alone. At the same time, there is something distinct going on here. So you can kind of see, I think this is a useful illustration for people who haven't yet seen something like that before. So today, the other reason that I'm going to try and go quickly is because I'm going to try to cover two heresies, and that will be reckless. But why not, right? We're going to talk about Donatism and Pelagianism today. And the reason that we're doing two, by the way, is, we had a few extra events and Sundays that kind of got us behind schedule, but I really do want to cover these because they're good ones to know about. But at the same time, next week we have our parish picnic, so there won't be a class. And then the week after that happens to fall, for a lot of people, on fall break. So just to be safe, we're not going to have a class that Sunday either. So the next class will be October 19th, which we'll begin a whole new series. After taking 2 weeks off, I didn't want to try to jump back into this yet again. So we'll be doing a whole new series. So let's go ahead and dive into Donatism. This is a really good one to know.
That is true.
It arose in the early 4th century. A man named, where's his name? Okay, I'll come back to his name. It's on here somewhere. It's essentially Donatus Magnus. There he goes, a North African bishop. So, if you think about it, Constantine legalized Christianity in the year 313, right? So up until that point, Christians were being persecuted, tortured, sometimes put to death, sometimes thrown in the Colosseum to become entertainment as they died for other Roman citizens. And in 313, that reverses, and now it's legal for people to practice the religion of Christianity. Now, if you can imagine living in a period so threatening, there were some who, when push comes to shove and their life's on the line, renounced their faith or soft-pedaled it or hid or whatever in ways that could be seen as betraying their Christian faith, right? And this included some priests and bishops as well. And so once Christianity was legalized and the situation changed, now they're able to be more free. They're starting to get a little more organized. Constantine's kind of bringing them into the inside. It's still about a decade away, but they're going to have the council at Nicaea that Constantine himself kind of calls for. But there had been many Christians who had lapsed, who had performed sacrifices to Roman gods or in some way acquiesced to the Roman kind of prevailing faith of the day. And now their legitimacy as vessels, if you will, for the gospel was being questioned. Donatus Magnus was saying, you can't trust these people over here because in the moment that really counted, they crumbled. And so how can we see as valid any Eucharist, anytime they offered the Eucharist, or anytime they baptized someone, or even, heck, what if this bishop who later, kind of prayed to a Roman god, did some ordinations beforehand? Are those valid? And so there's a lot of this kind of seeking to purify things and questioning the validity of things, which is kind of what I put up here. Now this, when you start looking at the definitions for Donatism, it often focuses specifically on the purity of the minister involved, but I think that's a little bit narrow, because I also think if you're really thinking about the spirit behind Donatism, the line of thinking, wouldn't it also be logical to include, like, saying, oh, you use this prayer as opposed to this wording of a prayer, and so it's invalid if you use this wording? Because it's all about getting things just right, whether it's the person or the prayers being used. And so when I thought of an example of modern day Donatism, I thought of this headline we saw out of Phoenix not too long ago, where they used the word I or we instead of I. We baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I would flag that as, kind of in that vein. But anyway.
So what happened? Were they really invalid?
Well, see, this was a big debate. The main voice kind of opposing the Donatist movement turned out to be Augustine of Hippo. And he essentially argued that no, in fact, it is, the grace of God that is kind of conveyed through us people, the hands and...
What did they decide about Phoenix?
I'm pretty sure that they invalidated those baptisms. Did anybody follow that? Yeah.
So if they invalidated baptisms because of the moral purity of the priest.
No,
This was because of the words used, but yeah, same.
Then all the priests who were pedophiles,
yeah,
Right.
all the priests who maybe had an affair,
Yeah.
rapists.
And so that's an example.
that's hundreds and thousands.
Yeah. And so that's a good example of where the church has gone back and said the correct thing, because they have said, no, in fact, even if this person was very screwed up, they were,
His intention
yeah.
was pure.
I don't even think it's about that necessarily. It's kind of like God works in spite of our brokenness, right? Which I think is a really, like, the reason I wanted to bring this heresy up is because I think that particular thought is so important. We have to remember that God can only ever work through broken vessels, right? Because that's all God's got to work with. So whether you have one of these things on, there's no such thing as like a perfectly pure anybody, right? One of the parables that people often point to theologically kind of bolster that Augustine perspective is the parable of the weeds amongst the wheat. I'll read it, it's short. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, which is a hilarious practical joke. But anyway, and he went away. When the weeds sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where did these weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. And the servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull these weeds up?" He answered, "No. Because while you're pulling the weeds, you may uproot wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at that time, I will tell the harvesters to first collect the weeds, tie them into bundles, and burn them. Then gather the wheat and bring that into my barn." So, obviously, in a lot of these parables, the owner or the farm manager, all that is, stands in for God, right? And essentially, this is a way of saying, no, let them grow up together. It's up, God will fix the mistakes in the end. And so, again, I think the same logic carries. You're going to have weeds and wheat mixed in with every batch of people, right? And if we try to create or chase purity forever, that actually is a path towards division and not unity. It created in this moment an endless cycle of suspicion and division, because if you think, well, if this person's compromised, that invalidates everything they ever did, and the question becomes, how far back does it go? How do we even know about all these bishops that are like, going back to apostolic times and stuff? Yeah.
I was just going to point out a logic flaw there in this argument, in that if you're part of a church that believes you have to be baptized to go to heaven, and you're baptized by somebody who was not pure but never got caught.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you totally don't know.
That's
And
right.
there's probably more instances of that than the other, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, there was a time in the Christian community where musicians were canceled by the Christian community if they got a divorce or found out that they were involved in some kind of sin. And it's kind of the same, like, don't listen to their music anymore because they got a divorce.
Yeah.
It doesn't invalidate, but with priests, they're standing in for God.
Yeah.
They're standing in for God, so God's purity is never in question.
Yeah. In the concept of in persona Christi, right?
That's the word, yeah.
And that's, essentially the idea that when the priest is celebrating at the table Eucharist, they're participating that directly in Christ's manifestation. It's not as emphasized in the Anglican tradition as it is in the Roman Catholic tradition, which I'm kind of thankful for because that's a lot of pressure. So, but let's take a moment to stop and reflect on this before we move on to Pelagianism, because there are lots of places where this kind of thinking becomes relevant or surfaces. And so I wonder what modern examples you might be able to come up with. What?
Spelling.
Oh, is there like a...
Pelagianism.
Oh,
There's no G.
Oh, yeah. So this is what happens if you use AI. And I put my notes in and I said, can you make me an image that portrays this? And this is what it came up with. So thank you, ChatGPT. What are some examples from today of Donatist thinking that still carries? Obviously, we get the baptism thing that we talked about. Yeah.
Even in my own life, it's always like, well, you've got to be, if you're wearing that collar, you pretty much not walk on water, but you get close to skipping stone. In a way that I can't possibly, because I don't wear a collar. Forgetting that, just like Christ, you are a human and you have a very special job.
Yeah.
It's easy to get sucked into that. Well, what the hell are you doing using swear words? That's not right, you're wearing a collar.
Or it's even worse when people start to believe their own hype. And it's one of the things I like about the Anglican tradition, right? Because you would have lived in and amongst the people in the village at the, and you've got the church at the center of the village, and every day you're there kind of doing life with everybody. And I think there's a hopeful aspect that, like, yes, they have a special calling to be a leader in this special way, but they're just people. I'm just a person. And I try to remind you regularly by strategically forgetting things and
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. What did you say?
Like our comedy routine this morning.
Yes, I know. I was like, I can't do it. All right, what's some examples?
This is not an example of this. It's just a peculiar thing that I wonder if anybody knows the reason for. I was driving to Phoenix about 3 weeks ago, and somewhere over the border into Arizona, there was this big sign on the right side of the road, black background, and big white letters that said, "Jesus is not the Son of God, there was no attribution, anything about the sponsor.
I looked
And I
it
thought,
up, yeah.
you did? I said, that's Arianism.
Yeah,
So I learned that, right?
But
Yeah.
it's a movement. It's a special, it's a sect and it's a movement, mainly in the South.
Oh, okay, interesting.
That's all I needed to know.
so there's that.
There's that.
We already handled that. That was like the first one, right? 325. So, yes.
When we get into these situations,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, as I told some people at dinner last night, I was at the second coming because I was 4 and I was in okay, Jen. I was at 4 in a Christmas pageant. And baby Jesus is Franklin Graham.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you would have thought the second coming had come.
Yeah.
And, I mean, everybody was, and I sort of asked, because it was a private kindergarten. And I remember getting in the car and asking my mother, really? And she's going, don't worry about it.
Yeah. So some modern day examples would be, say, a leader in a church fails in some way morally. And obviously that's going to affect you, because if you look to someone as a teacher or leader and all of a sudden they're not all they're cracked up to be, that can make us feel wobbly in our own faith, right? Yes.
What happens sometimes is that person does not acknowledge what happened, his fault.
Yeah.
And how powerful would it be is with those that go to their congregation and they go, this is what happened.
Yeah.
I failed and I want your forgiveness.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, then that puts them right back with us.
Yeah.
Because we failed and we want forgiveness as well.
And just like with other, I mean, we could think of examples of this. There's two things to parse through there at least. One is forgiveness. The other is they may still not be worthy of the responsibility and trust that had been given to them before, so we can forgive them, but maybe they do or don't continue in that role.
Get extended.
Yeah.
I think this is where, because we're a sacramental church, we place emphasis on the sacraments, not on the
Yep.
person doing the sacraments. Whereas if you're in what Dick and I call the church of what's happening now, you have more faith, you have the emphasis on the preacher.
Yeah.
So if the preacher fails, the whole thing of cards comes
Yeah.
down. Whereas in a sacramental church, you still have the
It's not a
sacraments.
personality-driven thing. And it's one of the things I like about, I think that's healthy. And I like, one of the things that a professor said in seminary that I've always repeated is we wear the vestments to match the altar and the lectern and everything so that we kind of blend in and disappear. Because it's not about the person standing there saying the prayers for the people, or it shouldn't be. It should be about God. And all that should point towards God. Let me move a little faster because I think we're running out of time here. But another way you see this is when people are kind of eternally in the search for the best, the most pure, you see this a lot with denomination hunting, right? Like, oh, I felt attracted to this group because I think they're a little bit more like the ancient church, or, they've got this aspect that I really prize. And then they find out about some other group that they think is even a little better, and they go over there, and there's this eternal restlessness and quest for whoever is the most pure or the most correct. And I don't know about you guys, but these days I feel more comfortable in a place that is open about not having all the answers. And recognizing that, we've got our flaws. Here are some of them that we know about. There are probably all these others that we don't know about, but we're earnest in our hunger and desire to follow Jesus. And that's the key ingredient, if you will, that really we should be looking for. Let's see. I'm going to move on, not because this conversation couldn't go on and be fun, but let's talk about Pelagianism. if you have kind of a chart here, you see that one's on one side and one's on the other. This misspelled word is supposed to tell us that Pelagianism is when we think that everything's under our control. It's not really up to God. We can live holy. We can get it right. If we just try hard enough, if we just stick to it, like my mind immediately, I don't know if this is true, but there was the rumor that like Obama was so disciplined with his diet that his big treat at the end of the day would be to have 7 almonds. I don't know if that's true. But if that is true, that's very hardcore on the like, I've got myself buttoned down. And that's the kind of discipline that I think it points to. So like everything else, the person that came up with this perspective was named Pelagius. He was a British monk. He lived in a little bit later in the 4th century, and he emphasized the human capacity for attaining divinity or holiness through simply living according to God's will, right? Just doing it all perfectly, perfect integrity, honesty, all that kind of stuff, discipline. How's that going for everybody else?
Those people are hard to live with.
It's like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps.
That's a good point. Those people are hard to live with. So there's a kind of an anti-Pelagian, speaker alive today that I really like. David Zoll, he's got a couple good books. One of the words he uses a lot is low anthropology. Real quick, anthropology is, study of humans, right? Well, in theological terms, you use the phrase low or high, Christology or anthropology to talk about kind of on the hierarchy where you put humanity's capacity to reflect God's goodness, or, how high up do you see Christ in this, way of understanding the world theologically? Well, he has what he calls a low anthropology. There are parts about this that I will freely admit I want to push back against, because I don't think, if you grew up in a tradition where you were never good enough in God's eyes, then the message of low anthropology can feel crushing. I do think this is one of those examples, though, of it all depends on how it's communicated and exactly where you're trying to lead people. So I think David does it in a good, healthy way. 2 quotes I put on here for us. People are suffering and dying under the torture of the fantasy self that they are failing to become. So I like that, because these days there's this prevailing idea that you've got to be great at your job, a great parent, always healthy. You just add all the musts onto the pile, and it just becomes too much for any one person to bear. And I don't know if you've ever watched someone who's kind of doing that to themselves up close, but usually something breaks at some point. And so he would instead recommend that we accept that there is no perfection that we're going to achieve, and instead see ourselves through the same lens of grace that God sees us through. The other quote I put on here is, the higher we climb on the ladder of self-justification, the longer it gets. Which is right? I mean, there's no such thing as I've arrived, I'm good enough. If you're stuck on this treadmill, it's never ending. And, different moments in history wrestle with different things. I think we're rife for a new struggle with Pelagianism, because the societal influences that led to Pelagianism emerging were that the Roman Empire was starting to crumble. There was a lot of corruption. This made a lot of people feel very insecure about the world and think that the world is all bad and evil. And what do we do? What do we need to do to save it? Well, we need to be really good. We need to have integrity. We need to overperform. And we need to do it all through our own effort. And if you look at our world now, we haven't quite hit that rebound yet. But there is a sense of is there still such thing as a good that we agree on? integrity still matter? You could see how we're kind of setting ourselves up for a boomerang effect of this. And I got a cool chart that we won't have time to read, but the healthy kind of alternative to the Pelagian tendencies are what would come under what would be orthodoxy, right? So I put theosis here because theosis is this idea that the Christian journey is all about us growing closer to God over time and taking on more and more of God's attributes. So we start off with humans being morally neutral and can achieve goodness by themselves, to humans are wounded by sin and cannot become godlike on their own. That sounds disparaging, but the truth is we're all born with the ability to do good or bad, right? Mm-hmm. And we all know that eventually we don't choose good at some point. And so even if we quibble with the wording, we've all lived this. So anyway, I'll let you kind of skim this, but moral perfection is a human achievement versus union with God as a gift, growing in holiness and participation in the divine life. That word gift is important. Because otherwise it's a taxing labor, right?
Well,
Yeah.
in the Bible, it talks about our relationship to God as a gift.
Yeah.
The gift of God is eternal life in Christ.
Yeah. And so with a gift, you think of gratitude and blessing. You don't think of, well, it's kind of like it's not like giving someone a puppy. And now I've got work to do.
Yes.
Maybe it's a bad example, but you get what I'm saying. So again, Augustine was still alive and kicking, and he became the voice that majorly argued against this. That's why he's seen as kind of such an important figure in church history. But let's ask for just a second, what are some modern echoes of Pelagianism? Actually, I'm going to back up because I don't want to distract you with those questions just yet. What are some modern echoes of this concept that we can get there on our own? Yeah.
The holiness movement.
Could be. We'd need to dissect it some to, yeah.
When we think about our ego that we build up to where it becomes ideal, we could get to the place where it becomes an idol. And that becomes narcissism.
Yeah.
Where we're worshiping ourselves at that point. And I would think that would sort of be a part of Pelagianism.
That is beautiful. Thank you. I love that.
Isn't that trade wife whole part? Oh, I'm gonna be a perfect wife, and I'm gonna look perfect, and I'm gonna take care of my kids perfectly.
Yeah.
And also, that makes me wanna be a white Christian mom is the way it should be, and, hold that whole.
So that makes me think about how social media is maybe one of the influences that presses
And
this.
men too, young white men
Yeah.
work out and be so strong and healthy, and that's all connected to white Christian.
Or just this idea that like I'm gonna self-improve the heck out of myself, and yeah. What about the idea, so in general, so could the prosperity gospel be in any way connected to this?
Yeah.
Because prosperity is not just about money. People hear the word prosperity and they think it's like, okay, if I do good things, I'll become wealthy, whatever. Or if I give away, there's like all these formulas like, well, if I give away to the church, God will bless me tenfold, all these kinds of things. And so I'm actually going to have more money in my bank account if I give this money away. There's that kind of prosperity gospel thinking. But there's also tied to that an understanding of like health, right? Like, oh, you're depressed. Well, clearly you've got sin in your life and you should pray. And so, and that's the same kind of iteration of prosperity gospel, only not applied to money, but, mental health or something. So there's all kinds of ways, yeah.
I just don't know where they get that. It seems so simple that nobody is looking at the Sermon on the Mount and they're wanting to everything else. I don't know, as you all know, I'm so disgusted by it. And what's going on.
Twisting the Bible.
Yeah.
Purposely since day one.
Yeah.
So
And yet,
what's the healthy alternative to this thinking?
it's the love, what Jesus said, and take care of the poor. Your sermon today was a really good reminder of what we really should be doing, and it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I get nervous in certain parts of town, more for my safety, not sure, but is maybe that's a bad thing, maybe,
Well, what I really think the church is supposed to be is a place where we're able to say that kind of stuff out loud and then challenge each other and help each other. Like, okay, well, I'll go with you, and that kind of stuff, as opposed to us feeling some sense of like shame, like, well, I can't say that aloud because then they'll think less of me, And so I think, in the church, we like to say our prayers shape our beliefs. And if you look at the liturgy that we have every Sunday, there are certain foundational pieces we don't even realize are working on us and our outlook on the world. One of which is the confession and absolution piece, because that regularly puts into our head that like we're going to pause, we're going to reflect, we're going to recognize the aspects of ourselves that differ or stray from God's perfect image that we're called to reflect, and we're going to turn away from whatever that thing is that particular week back towards God, and that we're promised God's grace and mercy and forgiveness each and every time. And I think that's the healthy alternative that is put there before us to regularly return to. Let me do this. So these guys are called schema monks. Schema, like a framework or whatever. But these are the Eastern Orthodox monks who have attained enlightenment. Like, that's not a word they would use, but essentially like the best of the best. The elite monks that have like prayed for decades, and they get these really cool looking like death metal robes. And so if anyone's gotten their life in order, I mean, they're actually pretty cool, but I'm pointing to that as like when we hold stuff up like this and think, I'm going to get it right. Oh, you're setting yourself up? Okay, so let's see. Where do we see? Oh, let's think about this. So we've kind of talked about this in people, but where do we see some of these heresies that we've talked about today kind of maybe either in our own personal spiritual practice or in maybe like a program at a church or something? Like, what if we went to Roadrunner Food Bank because we felt like we had to do it to be holy, as opposed to because we felt like God is calling us to be generous and respond to need? Like, you can do the same thing, but for different motivations. And one can be like an okay way of thinking, and one can be a very Pelagian way of thinking. Right? Yeah.
One could be with regard to evangelism.
Yeah.
Going out and sharing the gospel. You can go out and share the gospel in God's strength, and you don't have to convince anybody of anything. You just have to lay out what the gospel is. Or you can go out and shake people and look to get a notch in your belt.
Yeah.
In
It can be
terms of-
manipulative, or it can be open-handed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What about how does understanding God's grace versus human effort help us navigate personal faith and community life? This one's really important, because I always tell people being a part of a church, any community, but church is messy. Sometimes people come to church and not only do they expect the minister is going to be perfect, but they also expect that the church community is going to be like perfect love, everyone accepts me, no one's ever rude. And does that really bear out? No. You're gonna say
Everybody
something?
believes
We all
exactly
have our
what
little
they-
example that's coming to mind.
This is not to put anybody down, but when I first came to St. Chad's, I liked Jeremiah. Everyone was so friendly. I'm like, wow, everybody likes me. Well, I don't think that's true necessarily. And I've butted heads with a couple of people. And
Yeah.
if you get in, there's politics and little
Oh, yeah.
groups, and it's still a wonderful community. And
So that's a good example of like the honeymoon is over, right? But that's when the real marriage starts, right? And it's the same thing with our Christian
decided,
growth.
I'm going to stay. I'm going to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it work for me and them.
Yeah,
And I think with God's grace and human effort, we're not let off the hook to make effort. We still need to make effort, but when we fall short, that's
Yeah.
when God picks us up and says, oh dear,
yeah.
try again.
My grace is sufficient. for
When,
you.
what is the word in the baptismal covenant? And when you
Fall short.
sin, repent, and
And
yeah, it's the first or
Right.
second one on the thing.
and it's kind of like, yeah, you're not excused from trying,
Yeah,
but if you think you're doing it all on your own, you've got the
Yeah.
wrong handle.
and I always like that because it doesn't say if, but it says when. So yes,
So I kind of relate to this with parenting. I feel like with parenting, you try so hard to do everything right, and when your kids grow up and become adults, all they do is find what you did wrong.
yep.
And they beat you over the head with everything that was, and like you have to, somewhere in that, you have to find your own grace. You have to find grace and say, well, you know,
Yeah.
I did the best I could do at the time, and not hear the negative.
Meredith and I have this saying that we remind each other of a lot, and it is, people are weird up close. People are weird up close. If you get to know anyone well enough, you start to see their weirdness. And if you just go into every relationship expecting that one day you'll start to figure out what that person's weirdness is or that person's weirdness is, and guess what? They're gonna see yours too. And then that's the chance to be like, and they're beloved by God. And when their weirdness upsets me or gets in my way, I'm going to do my best to forgive and to see them with grace like God sees me. Yes.
I can't remember what I was listening to or reading, but it was something like, don't forget that you were created in the image of God. Okay, so at 66 you think that would have actually smacked me in the face long before now. But then I realized it's not only my job it's my job to remember that. So when I mess up and when I don't do things well and I don't say things well, I'm still created in the image of God.
Yes.
Then I am responsible to remember that everyone else that I see
Yes.
was also created in the image of God.
And that's a really good,
Just swallow down the,
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, but you were still created.
some people, not all, are wired to reflect on the conversation later in the day and be like, my goodness, I can't believe I said blah, 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 or I forgot to say blah, blah, blah. Like, and then we get really upset and we think like, oh, I totally failed and that means I'm terrible. And we can beat ourselves up for it. And that's a really wonderful opportunity for us to say, all right, now if this grace stuff is real, it also applies to me. And can I forgive myself like I know, God knows I messed up. Maybe you did or didn't even mess up. Maybe it was like a total, But like, can you forgive yourself? Because once you find that spot, that's where you start to be able to apply it to others. Be like, oh, well, so-and-so had one of those moments like I have all the time. So,
Yeah, it's about your weirdness. That is good because we tend to love to judge other people because, oh, they're not like me and they should think like me and do like me. So it is good to remember, well, just like I think everybody else has their weirdness, well, so do I.
Yeah.
And you need to remember that. that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. So when the honeymoon is over, that's when the real discipleship begins, right? Because you don't learn a whole lot from like everything going smooth and easy all the time.
I think it's good to live to be my age, because all of a sudden, the things that I never could be patient with, or forgiving, or kind about, I find it just kind of starts coming out of me. And, I don't, maybe I have learned something. I don't know. And, it's kind of a nice place to be, actually,
Yeah,
to be able to
that's cool.
see that stuff. And
Anytime you can like realize like, oh my God, I would have handled this different, and somehow I've wound up in this other place. Cool, it worked. You know, yeah. All right, we have to wrap it up because I have to go help the acolytes. So thank you guys.